Tonight in Washington, lawmakers are shocked after new intel shows the Venezuelan Navy working side by side with a cartel on the open sea. At 2:15 p.m., 120 miles off the Venezuelan coast, a US Coast Guard MQ-9 Reaper locked onto a strange formation. 4 fast boats were racing north at more than 40 knots, and 2 Venezuelan patrol ships, GC-21 and GC-22, stayed tight on their sides like a moving shield. Instead of stopping the smugglers, the warships moved with them, matching every turn. On the US cutter James, radar screens tightened and alarms sounded as the ship IDs came in. These were real Navy ships, armed and ready. This was not a mistake. It was a clear message that a national navy was protecting drug boats in international waters. What the crews on GC-21 and GC-22 did not know was that every second of this run was being recorded. If you want to follow this confrontation moment by moment, hit subscribe and stay with us. The moment the drone locked onto GC-21 and GC-22, it became clear this was more than a strange patrol. This stretch of water, 120 miles off the Venezuelan coast, is one of the busiest drug corridors in the Caribbean. From here, a fast boat can reach Florida in a single night or slip toward Trinidad before jumping to other islands. It is a highway, and every crew working these waters knows it. That is why seeing 2 Navy ships guarding 4 drug boats matters. A cartel boat is dangerous. A cartel boat with a Navy escort is something else. It means the people running this route are not hiding in the shadows anymore. They are using state power to move their shipments. For the crew on the US cutter James, this did not feel like another drug case. It felt personal. They were watching uniforms, flags, and weapons protect cocaine that could end up in American homes, schools, and neighborhoods. Every bundle wrapped in plastic on those fast boats represented lives at risk back in the States. And it was not just cocaine. Intelligence later confirmed this route was connected to at least 8 tons of product moving north over several weeks. That amount can flood whole cities, but the deeper concern was strategic. A cartel can be chased. A navy cannot, not without risking a fight between nations. When a navy ship becomes a shield for smugglers, the rules change. The danger grows wider than the sea. It becomes a political signal, and the message is simple. They think the US cannot stop them. That is why this moment matters. What happened on that screen was not random. It showed a system at work, a partnership between criminals and a military force. And it set up the next question the James crew had to answer. If they cannot fire, what can they do when the other side is protected by a flag? The first minutes after the MQ-9 found the formation were tense. On the drone screen, 4 fast boats cut across the water at high speed, leaving long white trails behind them. The Venezuelan Navy ships GC-21 and GC-22 stayed tight on each side, holding a steady 30 knots. Their gun mounts were uncovered, their radar spinning fast. Nothing about their movement looked confused. It looked planned. The drone operator zoomed in. The picture sharpened. Plastic-wrapped bundles covered the decks of the fast boats. The analysts behind him leaned forward at the same time. Everyone knew exactly what they were seeing. Inside the Combat Information Center on the US cutter James, the feed appeared on the main screens and the room fell silent. A watch officer pressed a finger to his headset. GC-21, GC-22. The operations chief stepped closer and said, "Confirm the flag." The drone zoomed again. The Venezuelan flag moved clearly in the wind. The officer nodded once, confirmed. A soft alert tone sounded from the threat display, but no one moved toward a weapons station. The crew knew the rules. These ships were in international waters. The US could not fire unless fired upon. A single wrong move could spark a political crisis. The captain's voice came through the comms. "Do not engage. Stay on them. Record everything." The drone adjusted altitude, keeping distance but staying close enough to capture every detail. The operator tagged each frame. One analyst whispered, "They're treating this like a normal mission." The tension in the room kept rising. These sailors had trained for drug chases and hostile encounters, but not for this, watching a Navy escort cartel boats in plain view. Then the situation shifted. One of the fast boats began to slow down, smoke leaking from its engine. The other 3 kept moving. Cartel rules say you leave the weak boat behind. But GC-22 slowed, broke formation, and turned toward the smoking boat. Even from high altitude, the sharp turn in the wake showed the move was deliberate. GC-22 is turning back, the watch officer said. The drone zoomed again. Sailors on GC-22 stepped onto the deck, preparing ropes. They were not setting up a rescue. They were preparing to lift the cargo. The captain of the James moved closer to the display. "Stay with them," he said. The MQ-9 dipped slightly to keep a clean angle. The first bundle came into view as GC-22 matched speed with the disabled boat. Venezuelan sailors lifted the sacks of cocaine onto the Navy deck with calm, steady movements. There was no rush, no panic, and no effort to hide. It looked routine. Inside the James, no one spoke. They were watching a national Navy load cartel cocaine in real time, and they could not legally fire, chase, or force the ships to stop. All they could do was record every second. If you think this moment shows bold confidence or reckless danger from Venezuela, press 1 or 9 inches the comments and hit subscribe to follow what happens next as the James keeps tracking them. The transfer on GC-22 lasted only minutes, but it changed everything. Once the last bundle was lifted onto the Navy deck, GC-22 separated from the group. The 3 remaining smuggler boats pushed north, but GC-22 turned east, heading toward the open stretch of water between Venezuela and Trinidad. The drone followed as daylight faded and the sea turned darker. Inside the James, the crew watched closely. GC-22 dimmed almost all its lights, leaving only a faint glow on the bridge. "They're going dark," an analyst said. The captain replied, "Stay on them." The MQ-9 switched to infrared as night settled in. GC-22 slowed to a near stop. It wasn't drifting. It was waiting. Minutes later, new heat signatures appeared. 4 small boats were heading out from the Trinidad coastline, running fast and low with almost no lights. The analysts tagged each one as they closed in. Within minutes, they formed a loose arc around GC-22. No radio calls, no signals, just quiet boats sliding up beside a Navy ship in the dark. From the drone's view, figures on the smaller craft tied lines and pulled themselves closer. Then the transfer began. Package after package moved from GC-22 into the boats. The infrared camera showed steady, practiced hands. No rush, no panic. It looked like a routine they had done before. Inside the James, the room stayed silent. They were watching a Navy ship deliver cartel cargo in real time. The drone operator adjusted the angle to capture every movement. GC-22 held its position, engines humming low. The boats from Trinidad worked quickly, taking the load with confidence, as if they knew exactly how long they could stay before another patrol might appear. The exchange ended in under 20 minutes. The smaller boats broke away and disappeared back toward the coastline. GC-22 stayed still for a moment, then slowly turned west, moving back toward Venezuelan waters with a clean deck and a completed mission. Inside the James, the tension didn't fade. What they had seen wasn't an accident or a desperate choice. It was organized, smooth, and carried out under the cover of a national navy. As GC-22 disappeared into the dark, one thought remained. This was only one transfer caught by a drone. How many more had happened in the same waters with no eyes watching? The night transfer near Trinidad looked like the final step, but it wasn't. While the James crew watched GC-22 hand off cartel cargo in silence, another mission had already been running far from the ocean. For over a year, an undercover DEA agent known as Neptuno had been sending reports from inside the cartel's Caribbean network. His work revealed something the public had never seen: Navy officers helping move drugs by sea. Neptuno didn't just report rumors. He listed routes, meeting times, and even the exact ships used to protect shipments. When analysts compared his files with the drone footage from GC-22, everything lined up: the route toward Trinidad, the timing after dark, the small boats arriving with no lights, and the calm, practiced actions of the Navy crew. The operation looked almost identical to what he had warned about. The real twist was how organized it all seemed. Neptuno had even recorded a price list for the Navy's services, escort fees, navigation help, and higher payments for carrying the product directly on a patrol ship. Nothing looked random, it looked planned and repeated. On the James, sailors didn't know any of this yet. They only saw a Navy ship doing cartel work. But in Washington, analysts realized the drone had captured more than a crime. It confirmed a functioning network inside a national military. When Neptuno's reports were placed next to the footage, there was no way to deny the truth. This wasn't a rogue crew, it was a system. And once this evidence reached higher levels of government, everyone knew the response would shake the region. If you think this twist shows a deeper threat or a bigger challenge for the US, press 1 or 9 inches the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. When the footage from GC-22 reached Washington, the reaction was immediate. A Navy ship moving cartel cargo in the dark was not something anyone could ignore. Analysts compared every second of the drone feed with Neptuno's undercover reports. The match was so exact that no one in the room questioned what they were looking at. This was a coordinated operation between a cartel and part of a national navy. The US moved fast. The evidence was taken to an emergency meeting at the Organization of American States. Delegates watched the drone clip of GC-22 sitting in the dark while small boats loaded cocaine from its deck. Some looked stunned, others said nothing. When the time came for Venezuela to respond, their delegation was gone. They had walked out before the discussion even started, and the message was clear. They were not going to explain or defend anything. After that walkout, the strategy shifted. Diplomacy wasn't going to work, so the US turned to the courts. Federal prosecutors opened 31 indictments across Miami, Houston, and New York. The charges were clear and serious: drug trafficking conspiracy, narco-terrorism, and money laundering. These cases were backed by satellite tracks, radio intercepts, and Neptuno's notes. The turning point came when a Venezuelan naval officer traveling quietly to the Dominican Republic was identified and detained with help from the US Marshals. He was flown to Miami and placed in federal custody. For the first time, someone tied directly to the GC-22 operation would face trial on American soil. Inside Washington, officials described this new phase in simple terms. The courtroom was now the battlefield. Instead of missiles or patrol chases, the fight would be built on evidence and pressure. But everyone also understood the risk. GC-21 and GC-22 were still sailing. Cartel routes were still active, and the next meeting at sea might not stay quiet or controlled. If you think this legal strike was enough or believe a stronger response is coming, press 1 or 9 inches the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next step of this standoff. The impact of the GC-22 operation reached the US fast. DEA labs confirmed that the cocaine moved during the Trinidad transfer matched recent seizures in Florida and New York. It was unusually pure and mixed with strong synthetic additives. Hospitals in Miami reported a sudden jump in overdose cases, many involving teenagers. New York saw a similar spike. For investigators, the link was clear. Product protected by a Navy ship was now reaching American neighborhoods. But the deeper problem was not just the drugs, it was the system behind them. When smugglers use fishing boats, the US can chase, intercept, or force them to stop. But when a cartel uses Navy ships with radar, guns, and national flags, every decision becomes more dangerous. Stopping a smuggler is simple. Stopping a warship could spark a diplomatic crisis. GC-21 and GC-22 weren't acting like patrol ships anymore. They were acting like protected delivery units. Inside Washington, security briefings shifted tone. Officials described the situation as a state-backed route, a pipeline covered by military authority. Satellites were assigned to track GC-21 and GC-22 around the clock. Analysts warned that each shipment carried under a Navy escort could travel farther and faster than anything regional patrols could counter. And because other vessels avoid confronting warships, the network could move almost openly. In Congress, pressure grew quickly. Some lawmakers demanded tougher action at sea, even intercepting Navy escorts if the pattern continued. Others pushed for more sanctions and more indictments, hoping legal pressure could break the network from the inside. But everyone agreed this was no longer normal trafficking. It was a partnership between a cartel and part of a national military. The biggest question now was how the US should answer. Treat it like a criminal case, and the battle stays in courtrooms. Treat it like a military threat, and the next meeting at sea could look very different. With GC-21 and GC-22 still active and patrol flights increasing, the chance of a direct clash was rising. Everyone in Washington understood one thing. The next transfer might not stay quiet, and the next encounter might not end with just video. If you think the US should strike harder or stay with legal pressure, press 1 or 9 inches the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.